Hey guys, welcome back to the Taekwondo Upgrade System Breakdown Edition. Today we're talking about Anderson the Spider Silva. Unquestionably one of the greatest fighters of all time. Really paved the way for a lot of guys and changed the way that UFC evolved from into a much more technical UFC, a much more athletic UFC. He really raised the game, and a lot of modern fighters look at what he did as the foundation of what they do today. And there's a lot of really great stuff to pull out of there. And if you look at the way that we did like the system breakdown on Israel Adesanya, Style Bender obviously pulls a lot from Anderson Silva in his style of fighting. Same thing with Machida. Machida trained with Anderson Silva, so it's no surprise that they use a lot of similar concepts, whether you're talking about that high front kick, the kicking game. You know, Machida had a much more karate-based background, so it's a little bit different for him. But even still, there's a lot of similarities in striking. And overall, I mean, Anderson Silva really did change the way that we think about fighting with his amazing Muay Thai and his amazing Jiu-Jitsu. And we're talking about how this all comes together. I do want to throw out there, I'm not going to talk a lot about techniques today. There is a much better tutorial on techniques by Anderson Silva himself. I'm going to leave a link below so that you can check it out. I strongly encourage you to watch it. A lot of what he does, I've watched it probably 20 times. And I pulled a lot of his techniques and I use it in my own game today. Techniques from the plum clinch, techniques from just defensive countering and stuff like that. A lot of really, really good stuff in there. I highly recommend it. You know, play with a lot of what's in there. But today we're not talking about individual techniques. We're talking about systems. Because I really believe that beginners learn techniques, intermediate students learn concepts, and advanced students learn systems, and you learn how to put this all together in a cohesive system. And we cover these systems so that when you build your own system, you can pull from this guy and pull from this guy and pull from this guy until you have a complete system of your own that becomes very, very difficult to deal with. So that being said, let's get right to it. Now, Anderson Silva is well known as a guy who spends the first minute of his fight waiting. Okay, there's a lot of pattern recognition from here as he just stays on the outside and he lets them move, right? He does that because he wants to, it's not so much that he wants to like be super calculating on like if he moves this way, I do this. There's really two reasons that he's doing it. He's trying to get a feel for how the guy moves and his timing and stuff like that. And it's mostly just kind of getting a feel for it so that you get a feel for as he comes in, how to connect with them, what his tells are. And what he really, I think, looks for the most is he wants to see how this guy is going to advance in to close the gap. Because what he does is he's going to use his front hand and he's going to use this to keep him at bay so that he's always just outside of punching range. And he does this because he wants to be able to counter him as he comes in. And this is where we go into our first objective, which is counter striking. His first objective is to draw them into a punch that he can counter strike. And there's a couple things that he does that are really important aspects of this. One thing is that, like I said, he's going to use this jab, especially with his long reach, to always kind of feel out the space so that he knows that at any time they have to take some sort of an extraneous movement or a step in order to connect with a punch. Whether it's a lead foot, whether it's a back foot, they have to move, even if it's just leaning in real hard. They have to do extraneous movement to get to him. They can't just connect with him from here. He's too far out of range. Meanwhile, he can still use a lot of his kicking, his front leg kicking and stuff like that. And he's going to start slowly picking at him to draw them into what he wants, and that's a counter strike. He wants to frustrate them from here. He wants them to feel like, man, I can't quite get to him in range, and I have to commit. And that's what he wants. He wants them to overcommit. And as he does so, he's going to use a couple tools to be really successful. The first thing you're going to notice is a lot of shoulder movement and head movement and hip feints. You know, Israel Adesanya, we talked about a hip feint, that shoulder movement. You know, he does the same thing. Silva, it's a lot of side-to-side head movement, shoulders, and moving hands. You're going to see this a lot. Either a lot of jabbing to kind of not really committed jabbing, just getting his hand up there to judge space here, or rolling his hands, shoulder movement, head movement. All this stuff is constantly in motion because an object in motion stays in motion, and it's much easier to continue a motion than it is to start cold on a motion. It's much quicker, and that's what he needs is that speed for that devastating countering. The other thing is that head movement is going to be really important for him to do this kind of matrix defense where he's going to lean back, rollers. He's going to do essentially big circles. I bet that guy warms up every day right here just thinking about defense, right? This is a lot of what he does. It's rolling back to take the sting out of punches. Because when you lean in a lot, you're going to get hit with jabs. This is going to happen. When I did the breakdown on Conor McGregor, this was something that was addressed when I did the actual sparring narration, is that leaning with my head, you're going to get hit a lot, right? The thing is, where Conor McGregor puts his head off the line to avoid punching, Anderson Silva, he'll put his head forward, but he's doing it because he knows that he can constantly rotate his head and take the punch, the sting out of the punch. It's like hitting a mitt that's moving away from you. Very, very hard to do any real damage. And you'll see him eat a lot of jabs, but they don't bother him. He'll even you'll see him do this stuff in a fight, like, whatever, because he knows that those punches don't really have any power. Unfortunately, he overused it against Chris Weidman. He got too playful, and he got too overconfident with it, and Chris Weidman slapped him because he caught him finally clean. And that's the danger of this system, is that if you're going to do this, man, you got to be really careful. Don't get too overconfident. You know, make sure that you're keeping your systems in place for spatial management and stuff like that. And he kind of let go of what he did on his second objective, and we'll talk about that in a second. Essentially, what happens, though, let's stay back on first objective, is as they move in, he's going to kind of matrix his way back with this rolling motion and let them run into his punch. His front hand punch in particular, it's not that it's super powerful, but yet he slept a lot of guys with it, right? He's got a lot of first round knockouts from guys walking into that lead hand. Why? Because as he comes back, he's going to lean back and let them run right into it. His head is going to be out of the way, so if they connect with him, he's rolling it off. It's not doing any real damage. But in the meantime, as they're coming in full force with this powerful punch, putting all their weight behind it and leading with their head, pop! He lets them do the damage to themselves. All he has to do is put up his hand and let them fall right into it. And so this continuous hand motion we talked about here is going to make it easy to do that. And you know, I'm sure you can see a lot of breakdowns where he comes over the arm in this case, or he comes back with this. He's going to take whatever feels natural in that moment. As they come in, leaning his head back and throwing these punches. That's really the name of his countering right there. And he slept a lot of guys with it. It's really, really useful. However, usually when they do pressure forward, and this is where he made the mistake against Chris Weidman, because normally when guys put a lot of pressure forward, he's going to go to his second objective, which is to engage in the plum clinch. Now, in Chris Weidman, he got too overconfident playing that he was trying to run back, and what he should have done is go back into his game plan. So really what happened in that fight, in the first Chris Weidman fight, is he broke his system. He didn't implement his own system that had served him so well up until this point. And essentially, once I start throwing one or two counter punches, if they continue to pressure in, or if they pressure in a lot, he's going to come in here, head down, hands forward, just like we did with Machida, right? And he's going to come in, but instead of going to an over-under, he's coming to the plum clinch. And he knows, man, once he gets you here, he's got you. He's got a couple fights with KOs from that deadly knee striking he does. I mean, Stephan Bonner, he didn't even engage in the full plum clinch. He was throwing counters, and as he drove in, he caught him over here in a collar tie, kneed him in the body, and dropped him with a solar plexus strike. One body shot, knee strike that just knocked him cold. Floored him. I mean, the guy couldn't get up after, like, you know, it took him like 2 minutes afterwards to get back to his feet because it was so devastating. And he knows his knees, he can capitalize on that. So what he's going to do is he's going to throw these long punches, and as they move in, this comes to my overhook. My other hand's going to slide in. I'm going to cover my head, keep my chin down, and now I've got you where I want you. And he's going to pull them in, and it's knee strikes for days, right? Bam, bam. And that's what he really wants. He will devastate guys, especially like early on in his career. People didn't even know what to make of it because he was so brutal with it. They had no solutions for it. You know, nowadays, and I think a lot of more experienced fighting guys have a lot more solutions. And like I said, if you want to see some good solutions, you can go to his own tutorial on it. But really what he wants is, early on, he's going to counter-strike you from, you know, pick you apart. But when you start putting on the pressure, he's engaging in the clinch, getting his head down, collar tie, driving in here, bam, bam. And he's going to break you apart with those knees. Now, the fun thing is, if they start to see this and back away from him, he engages in his objective 3. Objective 3 is when somebody runs on him. And generally what he'll do is he's going to chase him down and high section roundhouse him. A lot of times you'll even see he'll do a flying roundhouse to him, and essentially he's going to run them down. So he starts in here, as they start to, he'll counter him, as they start to pressure in, he clinches, as they start to back away, he steps, bam, and knocks him right cold. That system has worked really well for him. He's got some really good knockouts off of that escaping kick. And he can kind of bounce between them. So as he's here, if he starts to pick at him and he sees them starting to run away, he's going to run in and he's going to catch that left foot roundhouse kick right across their noggin and then put him to sleep. These three things are really the core of his system. Like I said, there's a lot of individual techniques in there for, you know, if this guy does this, that he's ready to move this way and stuff. He's going to throw in his leg kicks and his body kicks and stuff. He's got those front kick, the front kick knockouts and stuff like that, where he's going to let them walk into it. But mostly, this is what he breaks down to. Head movement, counter punching, letting them walk into it. If they start to put pressure on, clinching them, knee strikes. As they start to run away, head kicks. And he's so confident in a lot of this, you'll see him do head movement off of the back of the cage because he wants this. He wants them to engage so he can do the plum clinch. He wants them to get frustrated and back away so he can chase him with that roundhouse kick and essentially traps them into his game. If he can keep them so that they're constantly just out of range, and being up against the wall does that because nobody's here fighting from the wall. They're always here trying to figure out how to attack him. And he's just going to move around a lot, right? And as they come up, pop, he'll catch him. That's the majority of it. I do want to talk a quick second about his jiu-jitsu. Generally speaking, he doesn't do a lot of takedown defense. He will do a little bit, but this is not his strong suit. He's gotten taken down by a lot of guys. Chael Sonnen, pretty much everybody who shoots on him has a pretty high success ratio. He does stop him on occasion, but for the most part, he doesn't worry about it if they take him down. And the reason is that if they take him down, his first thing that he's going to do is he's going to pull lockdown position. And usually what he does from lockdown is he pulls the head across and he clasps his hands over the top of the head. Or if they start posturing up, he'll get his hands on the biceps and pull down the head and stuff like that. And he kind of makes them impatient. He kind of waits for his moment. He'll sit there for a long time because he's not taking any damage. In the lockdown, they can't advance forward. They can't get to like a strong crossface that you want to get in a half guard where you start, dropping elbows or start dropping bombs. All the stuff you want to do on a normal half guard, offensively for striking, you can't do very well on the lockdown because it's pulling your hips low. So he'll do that to frustrate him. Eventually he'll create space and he'll either open up back to an open guard and start kicking at him and up kicking, then get back to his feet. Or he'll pull a closed guard, or he'll wait till they get frustrated and they start putting their hands out there and he'll catch them in a triangle or an arm bar. That's generally how it works. But his jiu-jitsu is so high level for Yoshi that he has been very successful at catching guys and letting them take him down. He doesn't care if you take him down. He knows it's only a matter of time before he's got you. In Chael Sonnen's case, it took him 5 rounds. It was like the last 2 minutes of the 5th round that he had been like, it looked like he was getting beat up the whole time. But if you look, he didn't have a lot of damage. Why? Because while Chael Sonnen was throwing these little nothing punches, he was keeping his posture controlled, had the lockdown, and made it very difficult for him to do any real damage. And essentially, eventually he waited until he could get to a position where he could throw that triangle. And it took him a while, but he got there. But generally speaking, it doesn't even take him that long. I mean, he's beat some really, really good guys in jiu-jitsu. Damian Maia, Chael Sonnen's got the great takedown game. Pretty much everybody that he's gone against who has taken him to the ground has not been successful at doing a lot from there. And this goes into something that I talk a lot about in Taekwondo. If you're going to be good at Taekwondo or striking and have the freedom to kick, you should learn some ground game. You really need to have a good ground game because eventually you're going to get taken down. And that's okay. I think it's important to work takedown defense. But in his case, he just goes, okay, take me down. I'll just choke you from there. That's fine. Or get back to your feet and I'll knock you out. And so the reason I mention this in the lockdown and the way he utilizes his jiu-jitsu is it's part of his system. It is a very important part of giving him the freedom to do what he needs to do in striking. And if he didn't have that kind of high-level jiu-jitsu, or if you don't have a high-level takedown defense like guys like Israel Adesanya or Conor McGregor, you're going to be in for a really bad day. And it's going to make it hard for you to be successful at striking no matter what type of striking you do. Anyway, this is really all I have on this. He's a phenomenal fighter. There's so much more I could say about him in terms of the way that he breaks down individual movements. You know, he's got great techniques, you know, pushing off the hip and knee into the head and stuff like that. This stuff is all really fantastic, but I'm not going to do a better job of it than Anderson Silva himself. So by all means, please watch that video. Once again, I'm going to post a link below. But I hope that this explains the system so that when you start playing with your sparring, you don't have to think about these individual techniques in detail. Let them come to you in the moment and just focus on keeping your head movement. Let them walk into a punch. You know, as they start to engage, get your clinch, get your plum clinch. As they start to escape, go for that high kick. If they take you down, use your jiu-jitsu. That's his game. And that's his system. And that is a good system to implement. So when you're building your system, take pieces of this and know how to build it so that you have a complete system of your own, so that no matter what gets thrown at you, you've got a general concept that you're working for, not willy-nilly, oh, should I do this technique? Oh, should I do this technique? That stuff doesn't matter. Should I do this combo? Should I do this combo? It doesn't matter. Let that stuff happen on its own. You just worry about the base concept of as he's coming in, pop, I'm going to catch him. I'm going to stay outside of range and frustrate him and wait for him to move in and get frustrated. I'm going to take the sting off his punches and I'm going to catch him. And then if he starts to get too much pressure, then I'm going to plum clinch and I'm going to just tear him up with a devastating clinch. And there I'll work my techniques from there, right? And I have concepts that I'm trying to play with. And I'm trying to pull him back. So either he disengages and I catch him in a counter, or he disengages and I catch him in the roundhouse. It all pulls together into one general system so that you don't get so overwhelmed by so much to think about in martial arts. And I think that's really the key to systems, is that it's very easy to get overwhelmed. There's so much technique you could be doing in a moment. You're like, oh, I should have done this. I should have done this. Of course. But if you're thinking about systems and not techniques, it makes it much easier to apply the right technique at the right time, as opposed to trying to force a technique like stuffing a square peg into a round hole. That's what it feels like sometimes with techniques. You try to make it work. Don't try to make it work. Have a system, you know, whether it's this or the previous systems, or build your own. That's really what I think you should do, is find one that works for you. Anyway, I've gone on long enough. I hope you enjoyed this, and thanks for watching.